Welcome to History Stories Dose, one story 10 parts, subscribe now.
There was a time when Henry VIII could ride for hours, defeat the finest knights in Europe, and inspire thousands simply by entering a room. But by the 1540s, that athletic youth was gone. The once powerful king could barely walk. His own body had become his prison. The physical reality was staggering. By this stage of his life, the king reached a weight of nearly 400 pounds. Moving him became a complex logistical operation. Servants used special mechanical devices to lift him onto his horse, and teams of men struggled to carry him between the rooms of his palace. When a man holds absolute power over an entire nation, his personal physical decline is not a private matter. It is a crisis of state. Henry's decay created a vacuum of stability, plunging the kingdom into the most volatile and dangerous era of his entire 38-year reign. The torment began with a violent jousting accident years earlier. A severe wound on his leg simply refused to heal. Instead, painful ulcers covered his legs. They frequently became infected and gave off a foul smell, making every step he took a matter of agony. This chronic pain forced him out of the public eye. The energetic tournaments and grand celebrations that once defined his court were abandoned. He spent his final years trapped indoors, dependent on a shrinking circle of doctors and servants. The physical dominance that had once commanded unquestioned respect was gone, replaced by the reality of a king confined by his own failing health. Chronic pain bled into the king's psychology, breeding a deep and dangerous paranoia. He grew suspicious of everyone around him, interpreting his own physical weakness as an invitation for his rivals to commit treason. At court, loyal friends and trusted nobles lived in constant fear. They knew that a single wrong word to the suffering king could be fatal. Henry used his absolute power as a shield, signing death warrants with little hesitation. Some went to the block for treason, while others were executed simply for standing in the king's way. Under his rule, an accusation was often as good as a conviction. One wrong word could end a person's life. When the king's signature becomes a weapon of personal convenience, the court ceases to function on loyalty and begins to function on survival. Henry had become a ruler who was both absolute and afraid. As the winter of 1546 approached, Henry realized his final days were near. His focus turned toward the survival of the Tudor dynasty. His greatest hope was his son, Prince Edward. The boy was highly educated and carefully prepared to inherit the crown, but Edward was still a child, and his youth made the succession fragile. Henry was forced to create a logistical safety net. He restored his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, to the line of succession. Though he had previously declared them illegitimate, they were now the only way to ensure the Tudor bloodline continued. This desperate plan, drafted in his final months, would dictate the power structure of England for the next half-century. By early 1547, the man who had ruled with absolute power for nearly 38 years realized his final days had arrived. His reign had been defined by a staggering human cost, including 6 marriages and the execution of 2 of his own wives. To secure his own path, he broke England away from Rome and shattered the country's ancient religious ties. He oversaw the closing of hundreds of monasteries, seizing their wealth and leaving the physical ruins of his religious revolution scattered across the English landscape. The question remains whether the absolute power he accumulated was worth the broken body and the reputation for ruthlessness he left behind. Even a king whose word was law could not escape the one enemy he could never defeat. Henry's story ends with a fractured kingdom left to 3 children, shaped by his choices. One of them would eventually rise to become England's greatest monarch.